Good morning. Okay, so I'm going to fumble through this. I have not ever ran a meeting, but we're going to give it a good old college try. So it is 8:33 on May 20th, and we are going to call the Transportation Policy Committee into order this morning. And so really quickly, we have a quorum. We've got 5 of us here this morning. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. I think we all have read through and acknowledged safety procedures. Are there any public comments this morning? Team, did anybody come in for sign up? Any public comment? Okay, so we're going to go ahead and move on to agenda item number 5, which is approval of the April 15th, 2025 meeting minutes of the Transportation Policy Committee. Can I get a motion to approve our minutes from April 15th? Okay, I've got a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye. All opposed? That approves 5-0. Okay, we will move on to agenda item 6, which is to discuss and take appropriate action regarding resolution 2025-11 to amend the 25-26 Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP, by adding a subtask 2.11 travel demand forecast and technical assistance, and to advance it to the Texas Department of Transportation for action.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Back in 2003, the 78th Texas Legislature passed House Bill 3588 that requires so-called regional coordination of service planning to fill gaps and eliminate overlaps in public transportation services. The bill requires TxDOT to identify overlaps and gaps in public transportation services, identify underused equipment owned by public transportation providers, identify any inefficiencies in the services provided by public transportation providers, and encourage public transportation providers to agree on the allocation of specific services and service areas among their constituency. In response to House Bill 3588, TxDOT required each of the 24 councils of governments in the state to develop a coordinated plan for public transportation and human services transportation, and to create a standing committee to guide this work to improve regional coordination. As part of this locally driven coordination effort, stakeholders like the LMPO meet with other stakeholders to develop the more commonly named 5-year public transit human services transportation plan. That plan addresses 8 named priority population groups. This planning process, through our South Plains Regional Coordination Transportation Advisory Committee, called Regional Coordination, is mandated by both federal and state law to be included in our metropolitan planning process. Being careful not to confuse that with our South Plains Rural Transportation Planning Organization, or the RPO, and its codified planning process. Recently, the Regional Coordination Subcommittee was discussing TxDOT's Public Transportation Division's coordinated call for projects for this round of funding directed at the 5-year plan, and focused on an idea to study the relationships between public transportation availability in the SPAG region and the experiences of commuters transitioning from the rural setting into the urban setting, focusing on economic and social implications. The discussion included surveys to measure the interest in using public transportation, current methods of travel, and the perceived advantage or disadvantage of the utilization of public transit. The LMPO's involvement included understanding commuter behavior and flow of economic development travel from a proposed commuter demand model that ultimately could become additional input into our current travel demand model and help our transit provider in future route development scenarios. The results of the planning effort could also enhance the findings made by the consultants who completed SPAG's Safety Action Plan just a few weeks ago. The initiative here is to recommend a budget amendment to create a Subtask 2.1.1, which will allow the MPO to help SPAG collect their data and perform the analysis required to help rural transit providers better understand traffic flow and help identify commuter routes to be sure we have all the gaps in service identified, as well as any overlap and other inefficiencies. Results can also be used to support requests for additional funding for larger fleets. This amendment, funded through TxDOT's Public Transit Division's coordinated call, shows $25,500 for Phase 1 in 25-26. Those budget analyses are in your backup. And $14,830 for Phase 2 in 26-27. The sub-task description or scope is on page 15 in your backup, and the budget summaries are on pages 19 through 22. The resolution sponsoring the amendment is on page 16, and we have sponsored the required 2 public outreach activities with no adverse comments. And unless you have questions, I would ask your support on the amendment to amend our budget to add that subtask.
Any questions for Mr. Jones?
I've got one. So I assume we're required to do this, although it's largely a rural area. I'm kind of just wondering what the traffic demand commuter patterns are over all these counties other than in Lubbock and the immediate environs, but I assume we have to do this. We have to spend this money.
Yes, the required participation is from a regional coordination standpoint. As far as traffic patterns and commuter patterns, we've talked to you a little bit, particularly when we introduced the boundary expansion idea, how much traffic goes through Lubbock County, freight-wise and commuter-wise. And so the idea here is if we're going to help SPAG put their model together, we'll look at those commuter aspects and bring that information together.
I think SPAG's probably well designed to help accomplish that. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, is there a motion to accept or amend and approve Resolution 2511, which amends the UPWP by adding Subtask 2.11?
Move to approve.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed? All right, seeing none, that is approved. All right, we'll move on to agenda item 7, which we will discuss and take appropriate action regarding a proposed interlocal government cooperative agreement between South Plains Association of Governments, otherwise known as SPAG, and the Lubbock Metropolitan Planning Organization to provide professional consulting services and technical assistance to SPAG in order to develop the regional travel demand forecast for the SPAG region and to advance it on to TxDOT for action. Mr. Jones.
As noted in your backup, task 2.1 in the 25-26 UPWP sets out our responsibilities, the MPO's responsibilities to maintain and update our travel demand model to reflect changes in the regional infrastructure and travel behavior in order to forecast needs and align long-range plans with current conditions. In order for us to implement the budget amendment that you just approved, SPAG is proposing an interlocal governmental cooperative agreement with the MPO. The agreement represents 2 phases of work in 25, 26, and 26, 27. There will be 9 counties involved in phase 1 and 6 counties in phase 2, and that's the extent of the SPAG region. The scope of services stipulates a collection of current proposed roadway infrastructure data, new traffic analysis zones to collect and tabulate traffic data, and to help forecast travel patterns, the creation and development of travel surveys, the production of heat maps and other geospatial analysis, calibration and validation of the forecast, and final technical documentation and reporting to support rural transit and transportation planning. Council has reviewed the agreement. SPAG's attorney has reviewed the agreement, which is in your backup, by the way. And we are still waiting for TxDOT's approval. And so, short of questions regarding the agreement, and by the way, we have representatives from SPAG here that can talk to you about the agreement if you'd like to hear from them. But short of questions or any word from SPAG, I would ask your support for this agenda item, subject to approval from TxDOT. If they have any kickback, then we'll come back to you with the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. Any questions regarding this agenda item for Mr. Jones? Okay. At this time, I'll open up for a motion for agenda item 7. All right. Any further discussion? Okay. Seeing none. All those in favor of implementing the Interlocal Governmental Cooperative Agreement between SPAG and the LMPO, please say aye. All those opposed? All right. That agenda item is approved. All right, Mr. Jones, agenda item 8. We've got follow-up report on the Transportation Resiliency Improvement Plan.
As a follow-up on the previous Transportation Resiliency Improvement Plan, Mr. Frawley is here and will present a progress report for you. He'll highlight some of the updates and provide some additional context regarding coordination and timelines. So, Mr. Frawley.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Bill Frawley with the Lubbock MPO, and I'm going to report to you our progress so far on the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan. Just as a way of introducing it, the Federal Highway Administration has made some funds available that if an MPO does a resilience improvement plan, which they've come up with the acronym RIP, which is very nice. So we're going to call it the Transportation Resilience Improvement Plan, the TRIP, if you will, so we don't have RIP written all over some documents. Want to start off, and if you have a question anytime during the 7 or 8 slides that I have, please let me know. I don't mind being interrupted and discuss it as we go along. What the resilience plan is all about, and hopefully this is one of those documents that the ultimate parts of it are not needed that much. It's basically looking at which roads of the transportation system, city, county, state, federal, all of it inside the metropolitan planning area, are vulnerable to certain types of threats that would lead to this roadway being disrupted. And then how can those be planned for or mitigated? What can be done to minimize the risk? When something does happen on one or more of the roads, what's the plan to get traffic moving around it and get the transportation system functioning back to normal as quickly as possible, or even in stages if it's something happening across the area? Like I said, if projects that are included inside the resilience plan would be, some of them at least, eligible for some additional funding, potentially with grants, and possibly lower matching requirements from the local or state governments, just to give you a little bit of concept behind it. So one of the things that we're doing is looking at crash data and mapping. We're looking at TxDOT's CRIS data, which goes up to, I think, 2023 currently, 2022, 2023. There's always a lag year in the processing at least, and then another year before it's published sometimes. So that's very good, though, because it shows the hot spots, if you will, where crashes, especially major crashes that disrupt for longer periods of time, where those are occurring, the highest frequency relative to the rest of the metropolitan area, whether those are fatalities, serious injuries, semi-truck rollovers, something that disrupts for quite a while. And then we're also looking at media reports to fill in that gap in the last year and a half or 2 years. It's interesting and amazing how much detail sometimes television station or newspaper articles and stories will provide as far as what actually happened, when things were dispatched, and then how long it took to get it cleared up on some follow-up type things. So that's how we're looking at all of the different crashes. There's federal crash databases as well.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes,
what
sir.
does CRIS stand for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you so much. See, I did that on purpose to see who's paying attention now. That is the Crash Record Information System. Thank you. Yeah, it's not some guy named Chris did. No, thank you. And again, thank you for asking on the spot. I'll try to be careful with those as I move along. Something else that we're doing then to help with this vulnerability assessment is developing a road matrix. And I think I've got a screenshot of just an example of what we're doing. But it's looking at freeways, the major roads. So it's Marcia Sharp Freeway, Loop 289, I-27. And then as well, a lot of whether the strict functional classification calls them arterials or not, but in Lubbock, there's a nice grid system. Every mile, there's a major roadway. So we're looking at all of those as well to find out which ones are carrying what type of traffic, what are some of the major origins and destinations, whether it's a hospital, the university, downtown, other, big destinations and so on. So then we're looking at the vulnerabilities also in this matrix, whether certain roadways are most susceptible to flash flooding. When you get into things like ice, that usually hits a wider area. Some roads are more susceptible to the flooding or even ponding type things. Then visibility issues, whether it's dust, if it's wildfire smoke, those types of things. And then crashes, going back again at where the biggest and most serious crashes have occurred, and what those durations sometimes have been in getting the roadway opened again, or at least all lanes opened. One of the things that I found, I've done resilience planning for the Permian Basin MPO when I was at Texas Transportation Institute. I did some for Beaumont, Port Arthur, and I'm getting a little bit ahead, but to give you some more ideas, I've also been doing some peer exchange with Amarillo MPO. They are right now doing in-house a resilience improvement plan also, so we've been trading some ideas, and I'll bring some more of that up later. And then finally, in the road matrix, we're looking at parallel roads that provide redundancy or detour routes, either nearby or in some cases a lot farther away. And so the idea, how can the agencies all working together get their traffic rerouted and then communicate that to the motoring public as clearly as possible. Here's a screenshot of part of what the road matrix looks like. So you can see, and I'm not going to go through every single thing, but to give you an idea, the column A is the primary name of a major roadway, secondary name if it has one, and then the limits. So we wouldn't be looking at I-27 all the way through the metropolitan area. We'd be looking at segments between logical breakpoints. Maybe the airport and the North Loop, downtown, South Loop, and so on, like that type of thing. And then what is it providing access to the origins and destinations? So you can see there's downtown for those types of things on I-27. And then what are the vulnerabilities? A lot of it's going to be crash. Some of it's ice on bridges because that can shut things down if things go south pretty quickly. And then some other vulnerabilities, it could be things, you know, ponding on the roadway, wildfire smoke, dust, even tumbleweeds, that kind of stuff. And then what are some of the parallel roads? Where can you easily divert traffic to? What does it make sense to do? Now, and I'm maybe getting a little bit ahead here, but while I'm on this topic, I started off by saying some of the elements of this plan, hopefully, they never have to be used. But if we don't think comprehensively and plan for those kind of worst case things or the most extreme, then people might be scrambling, well, what do we do now? So based on the experience I had working with the Permian Basin MPO, where we looked at if I-20, for instance, got shut down for hours, and it happens more and more now with oil field traffic, construction zones, we looked at diverting traffic 30, 40 miles north on some highways that go up through Andrews and Kermit just to get them out of the Permian Basin, the Midland, Odessa area, because that would be traffic going further. In the same way, if you look 30 miles to the east, 30 miles to the west, 30, 40 miles north and south, there's parallel roads, almost like a nice grid box. Again, ultimate, if things really get messy on I-27 or something, you could look at diverting traffic around those areas. Of course, it takes a lot of multi-agency coordination. Better to think ahead, not have to use it, than to have to use it and you weren't prepared. Any questions on any of that? Okay. So we're also creating another database of first responders, record companies, municipalities, all of the incorporated cities and towns, and then law enforcement, fire, EMS, emergency services. You know, at first you think, oh, well, there's the Lubbock Police Department, Lubbock County Sheriff, Wolfforth Police, fire. It's amazing the number of first responder agencies that we're coming up with. And it's, again, important to list all of those, the contacts, what their primary responsibility is, and I'll show you another screenshot in a moment. But two things I want to point out about this slide with these different little text boxes. One, you may or may not know, this may be kind of eye-opening, record companies are the first people to be able to tell you an idea pretty accurately how long a roadway is going to be closed or how long it's going to take to open lanes back up. Because they can easily see, did this truck crash, usually it's the trucks that'll shut it down for a while, do they have hazardous materials, fuel leak, fuel spill? Are they carrying frozen or refrigerated food? Do you have to call the health department out to condemn the load? A lot of this ultimately goes back to insurance. The record company's not going to mess with the trailer and the contents until they know what it is, who needs to be notified. And they have a good idea, but they want to know. Otherwise, they get sued by the insurance company because they messed up the load even beyond what the crash was. Another thing that's really interesting, too, is I have done some of these inventories around the state for different places. This is the first place I've seen where record companies and their websites will say, we have portable livestock pens. And, yep, you know, any kind of, I was about to say cattle, but any kind of a livestock truck, trailer, whatever can turn over, being able to corral those critters up and get them off the road or keep them off the road, sustain them, whatever, that's kind of important. So I thought that was an interesting little aspect. One thing I want to mention is when I made this similar presentation to the TAC, the Technical Advisory Committee, a few weeks ago, they actually helped provide a couple of other law enforcement agencies. University Medical Center has a police department, like Lubbock Christian College or Lubbock Christian University, I believe, has one. The reason that that's there, and hopefully this never happens anywhere again, but to me, as far as I know, looking around, the only what I'm going to call mobile mass shooting event or incident, because resiliency involves naturally caused things and human caused things. Down in Odessa and Midland a few years ago, they had a shooting that started on Interstate 20. Person got pulled over, shot at DPS. They went up through Odessa, I-20, Loop 338, some other streets, Highway 191, before they finally got the person cornered in a movie theater parking lot. What opened my eyes about that, reading about when it happened, was the multiple law enforcement agencies that had to get involved, from the University of Texas Permian Basin, the school district, sheriff of both counties, police of both cities, DPS, and we found they didn't really have necessarily good ways to immediately communicate with each other. So we'll help identify anything that might be able to be improved. It might be a different situation here. But again, looking at things so people are prepared. And here's a screenshot of the, you can see that's just looking at about 16 or so law enforcement agencies that are in this county. And we're looking at all of Lubbock County, not just the MPO boundary, which is a smaller part of that. We're actually, again, with some of those outer potential reroute options, looking at adjacent counties. And to answer a question that could come up, yes, it's okay for us to be spending PL planning dollars outside the metropolitan area on things that involve the transportation system inside the area. Any questions? I only have 40 more slides. I'm just kidding. I have about 3 more slides. All right, Pure Exchange, already kind of hit at that a little bit. We're looking at the Permian Basin MPO, Midland, Odessa, your neighbors to the south. Theirs is completed. I helped work on that one originally. Talked about some of those outer rerouting ideas. And that's where I came up with this term resilience impact area. So we may call that outer area that goes into adjacent counties the resilience impact area. And then with Amarillo, one of the things that was helpful, I was just up there yesterday working with them on a few things, including the Peer Exchange for Resilience Planning. There is a tool that Federal Highway Administration has called VAST. It's the Vulnerability Assessment Scoring Tool. You can look at different roads with it. Unfortunately, right now, that tool is, something's wrong with the website. I don't know if it was just me, operator error, but I was able to confirm someone else is having trouble with it also. But we're working on that. But again, that's some of the value of Peer Exchange coordinating, working with these adjacent or even in other parts of the state areas. We are working on survey instruments that will go to some stakeholders. The general public will have this available with hard copies. Some people like to just write on something, check boxes, circle things, write in comments. We'll also have an electronic version people can go to off of a website or QR code, and they can type, click, whatever. Try to appeal to everyone's different preferred methods. We're actually going to have a stakeholder meeting this afternoon at 1 o'clock over at the MPO offices to talk with people from the Lubbock Emergency Management Program and then some other stakeholders who get involved in those types of things. And that's going to be one of our biggest stakeholder efforts to, again, let people know what this is about, what information we're going to need, what they can provide today, but also get those communications either started or ongoing. Any questions or comments? I've got a couple more things I can update you on as to what we're doing, nothing real major, but I thought I'd see if there's any questions or comments. Okay, the other things that we're going to be doing, I'm looking at the projects that are in the TIP, the Transportation Improvement Program, and the MTP, Metropolitan Transportation Plan, to see which of those projects, and really to varying degrees, would have an element that would benefit resiliency for the metropolitan area. Because again, we're going to include those projects ultimately in the final resilience plan to help them become eligible for additional types of funding and hopefully some lower match requirements. And then the other update that's not on the slides, we've begun writing some of the text, the introduction, kind of piecemealing some of the different parts of it together as we do these different efforts kind of concurrently. And our goal is to have it ready for this group to hopefully adopt with some review ahead of time, hopefully by September. Questions, comments, anything to throw at me?
Just have one question, and you may have covered this, and I may have missed it.
That's okay.
Just highly possible. How often is this plan updated?
That's a really good question. It's kind of an as-needed type deal. There's no requirement to have one of these plans. But again, if you do and you have projects in there, they become eligible. I'm going to suggest every 3 to no more than 5 years, it's probably good to take a scan through it, make sure that if a roadway has been improved that was in there, go ahead and make some note, take it out, make a note of what happened, that the resilience was addressed. Also, if there's been some type of a big incident, put it in an appendix or something, but every 3 to 5 years.
How often will you interact with the local agencies? Every year, only when you go to update the plan, or?
I would say every time the tip is updated would be another good time, and this will also probably impact project selection scoring.
Yeah.
So, you know, does a project have some potential resilience? Yeah, give it a range of points there also. So at least the minimum frequency would be when the tip is updated.
Yeah.
But again, getting these communications going and the coordination going or improved. Hey, if it's 6 months down the road and someone says, hey, we've got an idea, or we're having a problem we didn't know before, because that's one of the challenges. Sometimes a road gets flooded and someone will go down the road and go, this hasn't happened before, or, you know, we don't know what to do with this, or something like that. So I hope I didn't go too rambling on that.
No.
Okay.
No, and I appreciate the information. And just one
Sure.
more question.
Yeah.
Let's say an entity has, let's say the Wolford Fire Department has a big incident.
Mm-hmm.
Will you, when they are handling the incident, will you go observe? Will you get an after-action report? Will you see what you could have done better? What, you know, lessons learned? Like how?
Probably most likely, and after the case,
Yeah.
probably the last thing they want is one more bozo going out. I mean, me bozo, not anyone else, but going out there and taking up space or potentially getting in the way. Now, if it happened to be nearby,
Yeah.
sure, go out there and observe from an appropriate position. But more likely, talk with them afterwards. Say, okay, you know, how many lanes were actually closed? How long? What happened? And again, the biggest thing, lessons learned. And this is a dynamic document. Again, you asked about frequency of update.
Sure.
Something big, a big lesson learned pretty quickly. Let's go ahead and amend it, and it's not a big deal to do that.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're welcome. Any other questions, comments?
Any other questions for Mr. Frawley? Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Frawley. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Okay. And just for the record, there was no action needed on that item. That is just the report. Okay. All right. Seeing nothing, we're going to move on to agenda item 9. At this time, our Transportation Policy Committee is going to convene into executive session in accordance with the Texas Government Code 551.074 to deliberate the appointment, employment, evaluation, duties, discipline, or dismissal of a public officer or employee in relation to our Lubbock MPO director. Okay, all right, we'll be back. Okay, it is 9:37. At this time, we are reconvening into open session, and I'm going to open up the floor for a motion potentially for agenda item 9.
Madam Vice Chair?
Yes, sir, Mr. Atkins.
Thank you. I would move that this board authorize the City of Lubbock to initiate the recruitment for the Lubbock Metropolitan Planning Organization Executive Director position.
All right, so we've got a motion on the floor and a second for the City of Lubbock to initiate the recruitment process for our Lubbock MPO Director position. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Okay, at this time, we are 5-1 to open up our position. Okay. All right, Mr. Jones, I think we are now to the report section. It's your favorite.
Not my favorite. I think it's Mr. Warren's favorite. Madam Chair, at your discretion, we can dispose of the reports, save one, if you don't mind, please.
That sounds great.
Our financial reports on page 53. You have the February report reflecting 21% collected on our revenue and 29% on our expenses. And then on page 54, you have the March report. Remember, we didn't have a report last meeting. So in 54, you have your March report. We are at the 50th percentile with 73% collected on our revenues and 35% spent on our expenses. So we will close with that unless you have questions.
All right, any questions on the lengthy reports from Mr. Jones? All right, any further
Comment
discussion?
and a question,
Okay.
possibly. Comment. Thank you for the quite brief reports today. Quick question. We started leaving that estimated carryover line blank on our reports, and for years we held that carryover where we could see it. Can we get that back on there?
Well, we can, but we don't know what that is right now because we haven't received it from TxDOT. We are waiting for our third. Normally during the year, we get 4 work authorizations and we only have 2, and neither of the 2 have any report of carryover, so they're still working on that right now. But when
So what about the prior year's carryover? We've had a carryover for every.
Yeah, and it's still there.
But we can't see it.
Can't see it right now, but it'll be on the next work authorization.
Okay.
We had 900 odd.
Steve, it was a significant number. What happened that we don't get to see that anymore? I don't know. Good answer.
We'll bring all that forward for you.
Thank you.
All right. Seeing that we have exhausted all the agenda items, if there's no further discussion, it is 9:40, and we're going to adjourn the May 20th Transportation Policy Committee meeting. All right. Thank you, guys.